Alright, so I've been looking into making some sort of video series for myself, for my customers, so that I can have something quick and easy to show them when they ask me how things are made. But I've been struggling a little bit on finding a place to start, and a question popped up on the Ring Lord forum the other day that actually kind of sounded like a great place for me to start. It's something that comes up a lot, I think, especially with people who are new to chainmail, or maybe have been doing it for a while for a hobby, but then want to break into starting to sell. The question is, how do you make money selling chainmail? And there's several problems with attempting to use chainmail as your only source of income, or to break into the rent fair market. The first was obvious. Most patterns of chainmail are fairly simple. They're only time consuming to work on. So lots of people have learned the craft. Next, most of the people who work on or sell chainmail at fairs only do so as a part-time job. Most of them don't need to make a great deal of money selling the chainmail, just enough to cover the expenses. In that, we run into a problem. As a jeweler, I have to charge $75 an hour, which is fairly industry standard for bench work that I do. This covers rent, utility costs, employees like to get paid for some reason. The very specialized tools used for jewelry making are expensive. And then there's the nagging pain in my stomach when I don't eat at least every couple of days. For most people in the chainmail market, they don't need to cover all of those expenses and costs, the income from only chainmail. So when they're working on a piece, the tool costs are low. You can get into the business by only having a set of pliers and some jump rings. Rent is usually a cost that only is incurred once a year as a booth fee, and other jobs are paying for their food. So when a piece is complete, they plug in the formula of the number of hours spent plus the cost of materials, and then they get the number on the price tag. One of the problems is that they're only thinking about paying themselves for their hours. They put that price at $10 an hour, which is a perfectly reasonable pay for a hobby job. $10 an hour is great. But when you have other expenses and things to think about, it just doesn't work. And a lot of jewelers who get asked by their customers to make chainmail pieces or whatever start to do it and then start looking at markets like Etsy or other places, soon find that, holy crap, I'm going to lose money on this. Because the number of hours they spent working on the chainmail piece in their shop with the lights running, the heat on, whatever, the $10 an hour is just going to drag them under. There's no profit in charging $10 an hour for a jewelry shop. So this is probably where you're now checking for my sanity. I'll save you some time. You won't find it. So how can I simultaneously say that in order to keep my shop open, I have to charge $75 an hour at the bench, but continue to sell something that I also admit will not likely ever bring in more than $10 an hour? Like a lot of people in the trade, I started off making chainmail, and I actually enjoy making it. It is a fun hobby for me. Well, maybe not fun. It's sort of relaxing. Most of the time, chainmail is relaxing to me, unless there's some crazy deadlines or ridiculous things that I have to make. Finding new and creative ways to incorporate chainmail into my designs, I enjoy that. I also charge a little more than everyone else. I have to. But I found that with chainmail, especially since there's a lot of designs and chains that are made by machines, even though I can usually explain the $75 an hour bench cost, with 16 years of experience, the tools, the work that I do, I can show people that I'm worth that. Making chains, really, people just don't buy the $75 an hour. They think you're pocketing all of it. So I've never been able to charge more than $25 an hour for any chainmail work that I've done. I don't see that changing. Unless there's a huge shift in the market and we start moving away from machine-made chains, which I don't see happening either. Yeah, $25 an hour is usually the limit of what you're going to get out of chainmail. I also get to justify my premium a little bit because my rings are welded, and that's something that a very small percentage of chainmail jewelers are doing. Even a lot of machine-made chains today are still not soldered or welded, even though for machine-made ones there is a very simple process where they do solder core wires that the chains are made out of, and then all they have to do is put them in an oven and they self-solder. Even then, a large percentage of chains that you're going to see on the market that are machine-made are still not being soldered or welded. So if you can, that's one thing that I highly suggest. If you can afford to put some money into a welder, they're real small. You can get the cheap Chinese knockoff ones for as little as like $200, and they'll do well enough. I can weld 18 gauge silver, 20 gauge copper. So yeah, I would highly suggest, if you're trying to make money and you want to charge more per hour than the other people are, make sure that your chainmail pieces are never going to break. People associate handmade with quality a lot of times. If your stuff is falling apart on people, they're not going to be recommending you to their friends because they're going to be like, oh, I thought this was handmade quality stuff, and now it's falling apart on me. If you want to build a real business, you want to charge more than $10 an hour, I suggest investing in a welder. Now, with where my business is today, I don't have to move a lot of chainmail pieces. There's the old saying that small business owners are the crazy people who work 100 hours a week to avoid working 40 hours a week for someone else. And that's certainly a bit of truth there for me. Because of how little per hour I bring in with chainmail, it still has to be a hobby for me. I only really work on it during off hours when I don't have anything else to work on, and I use it as table fillers at events and things that I go to. So now we've made it full circle. Back to the question at hand. If all this is true, is it possible to make money selling chainmail, and if so, how? First off, if chainmail wasn't selling, no one would be making it, and we've already established that that's definitely not the truth. Now, how can you make money selling chainmail? I will share with you some of the secrets, strategies, and ideas that I've used for nearly 16 years that have been successful enough for me to have transformed my chainmail hobby into a full-fledged jewelry business. Rule 1 is to make it unique. This one should be obvious, but for a lot of people just starting out, it doesn't settle in for a while. And maybe that's just because people are working on finding their groove, which is okay at first, but you do need to find something to set you apart and make you unique from everybody else. So you've been making a lot of chainmail. You've perfected your closures, everything feels nice and smooth when you're done. You're also getting pretty quick. Now it's time to do some research. Go online and seek out others who make chainmail. Look at their websites, browse the forums, search the galleries. Now you have an idea of what other people are doing. Do the opposite. Well, not the opposite, obviously. You're making chainmail. There's only so much different than you can do. But add your own personal flair to every project you work on. Take elements and ideas of what others are doing and use them, but don't copy entire projects. This will save you in two respects. One, people don't really like to be completely copied, especially if they are trying to make money. And two, for the same reasons a person trying to sell something doesn't want the exact same thing being sold by someone else, you aren't going to want to be trying to sell the same thing that someone else is selling. When two people are trying to sell the exact same product, that often comes down to price for the consumer. And then you're just in a race to the bottom, where no one makes any money. Step 2, find your niche. Finding your niche is something that may take a bit of time, but it'll help you in a lot of ways to not just say that you're a general chainmailer, but instead have a single area of expertise. You can start this by breaking the industry into two main categories, armorers and jewelers. Most people really making money with chainmail fall into the jewelry side, but that's not to say that there aren't those who succeed in the armor department. Those who do succeed on the armor side generally make leather or plate armor as well. That's because it can be very difficult convincing people to sleep in their cars for a month while wearing a house payment worth of chainmail armor. I obviously sided with the jewelers, and that's what I know most about. I'm sure you'll be able to find people who've been successful, and you can talk to them about how they got to where they are. For me, after floundering about as a general chainmail jeweler for a while, a brilliant niche came to me in a flash. Actually, my mom suggested it. My mother is a physical therapist and very into holistic health. She said many of her patients swear by their copper bracelets for arthritis, but they didn't like at the time that the only options were hard cuff bracelets, as they were uncomfortable for a lot of people. So I started making tons and tons of copper bracelets, including magnetic beads. I'm still not convinced magnets do anything, but my customers are, so I don't argue with them. As Mr. Big Weld would say, see a need, fill a need. If you don't know where that quote comes from, You probably don't have children yet, and probably haven't seen every children's movie ever made 20,000 times. The quote is a great place to start, though. This is why you should spend every spare moment researching the market, both chainmail and just general jewelry or armor, depending on which side you went with. Tip 3. Use less of the expensive stuff. Anything from beads to take up space or leather straps to fill out a design will give you a huge advantage in the amount of time you've spent working on a piece. Less time on a piece means you can sell it for less, and you'll always have an easier time of selling a $20 piece than convincing somebody to hand over the equivalent of their car payment for a single piece of jewelry. Especially since those armorers already convinced them to hand over their house payment, where they're going to sleep now. This works great for armorers as well. For areas that need movement, shoulders, waist, arms, and whatnot, chainmail is a great option. But for the chest and back, a couple of sheets of leather would do nicely to help reduce the cost of time spent on a piece. Fourth tip, waste your time, not your money. At least early on. Once you've established yourself, you're going to want to flip that, but I'll explain. Do everything from making your own clasps, make your own rings, make your own tools. Seriously, make or modify tools to get them to work for you. The less capital you have to put down early on, the better off you will be. After a couple of years, when you've established yourself into your niche market, then it's time to flip that. Buying your rings, buying clasps, and buying better tools at this point only makes sense. If you spend 10 minutes making a clasp, even if you're only charging $25 an hour, that's still $4 you have to pass off on your customers. Whereas you can buy really nice sterling silver clasps for as little as 50 cents each. So this is one of those pick your battles moments. Early on, you will likely want to fight this battle. Save yourself some money for advertising and events. But after you've established yourself, it just stops making sense. Tip 5. Fill out your event space. There are some rules or laws of retail sales that I was completely unaware of when I first began trying to sell my chainmail wares. I was heading to my first event, armed with almost $2,000 worth of product, and I assumed that if I only sold half of it, I would have a great weekend. I don't know why I assumed I'd sell at least half of my product, but I did. Anyways, what I learned very quickly is that there are retail sales laws that say that you can only sell 10% of what's on the shelves. I ended up walking away from that event with about $200 in my hand, and that 10% rule has held steady for me for almost 16 years now. Next, there's a retail sales law that actually pertains to advertising, but because of the unique atmosphere of trade shows and fairs, it works out to call the patrons of an event your advertisees. And that's the law of return on investment for an advertisement. This is going to sound crazy to you who are new, but you will only sell to about 1/2 of 1% of the total number of patrons. That means if you attend an event with 20,000 patrons, you can expect to sell to no more than 100 of them. Now say the average price of the wares you're selling is $40, that means you have a maximum income for that event of $4,000. But remember, you'll never move more than 10% of your product. So that means if you want to maximize your potential for this fictitious event, you need to arrive with $40,000 worth of product. So again, I mean it when I say it. Fill your event space with your product. Tip 6, play nice with others. Starting out, you won't likely have enough stock. Even when you think you do, you don't. It's also expensive to go to events, and a lot of them are 12-hour days, so you want somebody there with you. Team up with somebody like-minded making similar items so you can fill out your event space together. You might see this as competition, trying to team up with someone, but you can't think that way. If you followed the first rule and created unique designs, you're not competition, just different styles that you can offer to your customers. You will help each other by filling out the tables, and with at least 2 very unique styles, patrons will spend more time looking around, giving you more time to sell to them. This also applies to online. This is something that I regret most about my early days of selling chainmail. Seeing others selling similar products to what I was, but pricing their products too low, made me an angry young man. Then I often vented that anger on forums and in emails. It didn't make me a popular figure, and even hurt me when I was trying to expand and sell at more events. Don't be that guy. Trust me, it's not worth it. Alright, so that just about wraps up all that I could think of for this. Let me know what you thought. Did I miss anything? Is it a fruitless adventure trying to make money with chainmail, or do you feel more prepared to take on this great challenge? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you.